Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Progress Texas Advocacy and Development Coordinator Tatum Owens. Our transportation system, which moves more than 31 plus million Texans, is filled with construction and traffic. It's expensive, it's dangerous, hard to walk or bike around, and significantly more deadly than other large states. It's built on a foundation of segregation and systemic racism, and we all depend on it working, whether that's by car, bus, bike, railway, or by foot. Everything's bigger here, yes, the trucks especially, but we've still seen pushback against public transportation initiatives like Lightspeed Rail that would help folks get around, reduce pollution statewide, put people first, and money back in our pockets. When people think of what their taxes go toward, they think of roads and fixing potholes. But there's so much more to discuss about transportation in Texas. And we have two guests here today to tell us more about why you should care about reforming Texas transport. Welcome, State Representative John H. Bucy III, a native Texan and small business owner, proudly representing District 136, a staunch fighter for strong public schools, access to healthcare, good jobs, equality for all, and the freedom to vote. Shameless plug, check out our podcast episode on the Texas Voting Rights Act, which he authored. First elected in 2018, he has been recognized by the Texas House Democratic Caucus as Freshman of the Year and Hill Country News Readers Poll as Best Local Elected Official in 2019 and 2020. Thank you for joining us today, Rep. Bucy.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about how we can change mobility in this state.
Let's do it. Also, Miriam Schoenfield, an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Texas at Austin, go Horns, and the director of the Texas Prison Education Initiative. She's also a freeway fighter with Rethink 35 and a part of the Texas Streets Coalition. Miriam, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have both of you on today. Let's begin with some introductions for the audience. Rep. Bucy, start us off. Tell us about yourself and your work in the Texas House. Then Miriam, if you could share about yourself and your work with the Texas Streets Coalition and Rethink 35.
Sure, yeah. State Representative John Bucy, proudly serving Austin, Cedar Park, Round Rock, and Williamson County. I'm in my fourth term. I honestly love waking up every day and coming down to the Capitol and being in the legislature. I don't always love every night going home from this place, but I do believe you represent 200,000 people. If you can't be excited to come down and do this job, then somebody else should do it. And so I try to wake up with that attitude. Most of my time here has been focused on voting rights. I'm vice chair of the elections committee. I've served on the elections committee all 4 terms that I've been in the legislature. Filing about 30 bills this session alone on elections policy. It's an uphill battle. It's mainly been defense in my 7 years, but we're trying to fight to ensure that we have access to the ballot box for everyone that should have access. And so that's what we want to do and modernize the system. In addition, I've worked hard to fight for Medicaid expansion, children's health care. I serve on the public health committee, and I'm proud, and I know we're going to get in the weeds on this. I'm just proud of some of the fights we've had around protecting public transportation over the past few sessions, but also trying to play a vision for the governor to see that we can be doing more. And so filing bills and advocating for legislation that could change the shape of this state. And so happy to be here to talk about it.
Me too. And Miriam, could you please share a song?
Yeah, sure. And hearing Representative Bucy's remarks got me so excited about this conversation because there's such big, juicy transportation issues happening right now. My name is Miriam Schoenfield. My day job is, I teach philosophy and I also work in prison education. But transportation is a passion of mine. I got involved with Rethink 35 here in Austin, which is really a transportation advocacy org that kind of came together around the major issues we're facing here with the I-35 expansion. But through doing that work, it's increasingly become clear that there's organizations and cities and advocates all across the state facing very, very similar challenges. And so the Texas Streets Coalition is a very exciting statewide organization that brings together transportation advocates from all over different cities, rural areas, urban areas, to advocate for safe and healthy transportation for Texas. So we're excited to be here.
Me too, and much needed support, putting new initiatives together for Texas streets, roads, transportation overall. So first, for Miriam, then Rep. Bucy, can y'all paint a broad picture for our audience describing the transportation system in Texas? The good, the bad, the ugly construction everywhere. What does Texas transport look like right now versus historically? What modes of transport dominate? And how does TxDOT, or the Texas Department of Transportation, and public transport fit in? Miriam.
Okay, so the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's see. We'll start with the good. The good is we have a lot of money. So the Texas Department of Transportation has a $100 billion budget for over the next 10 years. That is a monumental sum, and we could be doing great things with that funding. The bad is that we have a whole bunch of systems in place that prevent us from doing a lot of great stuff with that money. And one particularly egregious example of this is that it's baked into the Texas Constitution that 96% of our transportation funding has to go to highways. And I mean, you just have to think for a second about how crazy that is. I mean, imagine if the Texas Constitution required that 96% of education funding had to go to trumpets or lab supplies or something. We would all recognize that that makes no sense whatsoever, not only because we need a greater mix, but also because needs change over time. And, one reason the transportation instance of this is so tragic is that while highways are really great infrastructure for connecting people and goods across long distances, that's what the highway system was built to do, it is a terrible urban transportation investment. And most Texans today live in urban areas. And not only are highways expansions, this endless cycle we've been into of pouring more and more money into these urban highways, they're not just ineffective. We've got decades of evidence showing that they don't relieve congestion. They're also extremely harmful. They cause pollution. They tear apart our communities. They're bad for our health. They're bad for the climate. So I think the bad is really just that we have a lot of resources, but our hands are tied. We don't have the flexibility to use those resources in the way that would serve us best. And so, I'm sure Representative Bucy will talk more, but we're super excited about this constitutional amendment he has filed to really free up those transportation dollars.
Yeah, I think Miriam is painting a good picture here. I mean, our problem is it's not inherently that we have roads, it's that that's all we really have. We don't have any diversity of mobility in this state. I do have a bill in House Bill 542, a funding bill, that would have said you could take some of at TxDOT's approval. So we're not even, it's baby steps in this legislature. But at TxDOT's approval, they still have to approve the project, but allow them to diversify their funding. That is not limited so much just to the highway system, but for transit-oriented projects. So, I mean, that could be, light rail if it made sense. It could be maybe in rural areas, they can't afford a real public transportation, but maybe they need some for for senior citizens or something to get to and from places they can't afford it in a small town. This would allow TxDOT to help them with projects like that. Think of multi-mobility, bikes and walking paths and stuff like that. We're just trying to free it up. And this bill is so small in the sense that it doesn't mandate how it's spent. It still leaves that to TxDOT, which is still appointed and coming down from, across the aisle. But it's just saying, let's give you more flexibility because each community has different needs. And I wish we could get that done. We had a hearing. We're gonna keep looking at it. We're pushing it. But I mean, it's an uphill battle here to get us away from just the one mobility of highways. And, I drive a Jeep. I'm not going to sit here and bash Texans for Texas culture of trucks and Jeeps. And we could do better environmentally. I understand that. But what we really need, I think what's sensible right now is to diversify. And so, we'll get more in the weeds, but that's why we need more trains. We need more public transportation. We need more busing, bike paths. And it's different whether you're talking about the highway system connecting areas with high-speed train or locally with just light rail and other projects that we could be doing. And so wish we could get some real movement on 542. I was glad we had a hearing early on in session. And hopefully, we could see some of our friends across the aisle come to light and give TxDOT a little more authority to go serve communities' needs better, because Miriam is right. Times change and we really have different needs in different communities. And with 254 counties, like my example of maybe a bus to help senior citizens in rural Texas get to the grocery store. Maybe in Austin, it's light rail, different projects, different places.
Definitely. Let's get people moving. Thank you both for sharing. Next, we're going to get into the Texas legislature and this 89th legislative session. I'll start us off by highlighting 2 bills targeting major metropolitan, highly populated areas that exemplify some of the barriers we face in trying to improve transportation options in Texas. One bill of note is HB 3187 and its companion Senate Bill 1557, which proposes cutting millions of dollars for the Dallas Area Rapid Transit, or DART system, one of the longest light rail systems in the country. This would jeopardize mobility and operations for 692 buses that serve more than 220,000 passengers per day. Then we have HB 3879 and SB 2519, which would kill Project Connect in Austin and block similar initiatives statewide. It's a larger problem, and I'll note that this project has funding for Lightspeed Rail. Again, it comes up. Our state is growing by the day, and still some elected officials are trying to cut funding for one of the central uses of our government resources, from the top down, nationally, and boiling down to Texas. Miriam, would you please share about bills for this session that the Texas Streets Coalition is working on and priorities overall? And afterwards, we'll get into another question for Rep. Bucy about his bill, specifically HB 483.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we already talked about the constitutional amendment a little bit, but that I would say is not just a high priority for us, but it's kind of the theme of our priorities. Like, as the representative said, we're really interested in just giving TxDOT more options and giving communities more options. There are a lot of really smart people at TxDOT. I don't agree with them on everything, but there are experts there, and we just want to open up options for them to really use that expertise in ways that they think are best. So there are a couple other bills that we're excited about. Please don't quiz me on the numbers here, but I'll describe them to you, some of the ones we're really excited about. Another one that's kind of on that same theme of giving more options for addressing transportation challenges is a bill filed by Representative Hinojosa that's really about specifically allowing TxDOT to apply a more diverse treatment of transportation options on roadways in urban areas. And this, again, would be a kind of policy that could only go forward if TxDOT agreed to it, if the Metropolitan Planning Organization agreed to it, but it's just about there being more options. Another bill that we think is really important this session, which was filed by Morales Shaw and companion bill by Senator Cook, is about making sure that when we're doing huge transportation projects like major highway expansions and so forth, that as part of that process, TxDOT is looking at alternatives that local governments are supporting. Because too often local governments are kind of left out of the conversation of projects happening in their areas. And so this is, again, it's not forcing anything. It's just saying, like, as part of the process, can we take a look at the alternatives that the local governments support? So, I mean, there are a few others, and I could go on, but I, to your point earlier, Tatum, I think a lot of this session is about defense because, believe it or not, despite all of these restrictions that we've been talking about in the current system, as you mentioned, there's all these bills that are trying to restrict us further. There's the Project Connect bill you mentioned, which is trying to override the will of Austin voters to fund their own light rail system. There's a bill that's trying to prevent Harris County from using transportation dollars on public transit and sidewalks. There's a bill that's trying to prevent local government from doing multimodal transportation projects. So much of what we really need to be focusing on is making sure that we preserve the transportation freedom that we have right now, in addition to expanding it.
I love that term, transportation freedom. And we'll get into that in our next question. I appreciate that you address the bad and the good, the bad, the ugly. It is about defense. And yes, to Rep. Bucy's point, it definitely is. That's where we are. For our next question for Rep. Bucy, we're going to get specific about a hot topic in public transport, Lightspeed Rail. We're lucky to have the author of an exciting bill proposing a high-speed rail project that would link San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas along I-35. Rep. Bucy, you've previously said that if put into law, HB 483 would modernize Texas transit, help prevent car accidents, and reduce vehicle emissions. I like how you illustrated the everyday benefits it could provide. saying you could live and work in Dallas, go to a meeting in Austin, have dinner in San Antonio, and be home in time to put your kids to bed. Fantastic. Please tell us about your bill, HB 483, and its companion, SB 24 from Senator Eckhart. What would it do? Why do we need it? And what problems do we face in getting it off the ground?
Well, I think the problems we face is what Miriam outlined, and that's that. And I really think of it as we're kind of living in the dark ages. Texas, when we were pushing our road system, our highway system, you think in the 80s, we were the leader in the nation. We were forward thinking. We had some of the best system, safer system. We were just really ahead of the game. And now when we come to looking at where we are today and thinking about what Texas needs to do when it comes to multi-mobility, we're living in the dark ages. It's like we don't want to accept that there needs to be change. We've got a bunch of elected leaders that I don't think represent truly the voice of the people of this state, but because the way our whole election system, caters to the extremes, they're catering to kind of an old way of living where we're not modernizing. I mean, in a state that is becoming the new tech hub, and with business diversity here in Central Texas, we're living in the dark ages when it comes to mobility, and it's really sad that that's happening. We need to do more. That's why we need to pass bills like we talked about and that Miriam talked about that will allow TxDOT to diversify. And specifically, bill I have, House Bill 483, as you outlined it's to create a high-speed rail to connect the I-35 corridor. This half of Texans live along the I-35 corridor. It's the most trafficked road in America. And so if we could come up with another way, if you drive on the I-35 corridor in the middle of the night and you're not bogged down by traffic, you can do it Austin, Dallas in 3 hours. But most of the time that's not the case because of road construction and then traffic during the daytime. It's a terrible drive. It's a flat, terrible, overcrowded drive. NAFTA or whatever Trump calls it now. Our trade agreements run up and down the I-35 corridor, lots of traffic, trucks. Very important that we move goods, but it's also more dangerous when you talk about trucks and cars side by side on this road. This would create another option, and it would be a faster option. It'd be high-speed rail. What the bill would do is it would basically say, TxDOT, go out, find a public-private partnership, and start building a high-speed rail. I mean, it's a simple bill in that sense. Let's build a high-speed train defined as 110 miles per hour or faster. I mean, hopefully faster, 200 miles per hour. And when you think about the analogy used, 200 miles per hour, you could get between Austin and Dallas in an hour. You could get between Dallas and San Antonio in an hour and a half. You could do it without the bog down of traffic and road construction, which is happening constantly on I-35. I don't think I-35 will ever be done because of so much traffic and trucking that goes on it. We're always going to be doing maintenance. I think about the Golden Gate Bridge. They start painting it from one end to the other, and as soon as they finish, they start repainting it again to keep it the landmark that it is. I-35 seems like the ugly landmark that it is, that we have to constantly be maintaining. I get it. We are a growing state. We need to move people up and down the I-35 corridor. Let's not limit ourselves. And so this bill, House Bill 43, could change that, and it could give us another option. And I think about all the people in business and families that have connections between those three cities, how this would allow you to get back and forth so much more rapidly and not take all the time. Even on the airplane flight, we talk about, it's 45 minutes to an hour if you're going from Dallas to San Antonio. You still have to deal with all the slowness of getting to and from our airports and the security and everything that goes into keeping everyone safe in the air. Trains function differently, and it's a lot more people, and it would just be a lot more efficient. And so I really hope we can get some progress here. And to add to that, we just found out today the bill got set for a hearing. It's going to be heard in transportation on Monday. It's going to be a hard lip, but I'm excited that we're going to be able to actually talk about why we need to get this done in this state. So I hope, Miriam, you can be there. I hope others can be there and really talk about the need for high-speed rail. And I know, we're not limited to this. I'm pushing the I-35 corridor because it is the most traffic, because it's the busiest. There's an ongoing project between Dallas and Houston, which we can also, get into the weeds on. But this would change this state. And I think if Governor Abbott was true to his vision of this state of being a leader and being forefront and modernizing, we need high-speed rail. And without it, and without this option for Texans, we're really not moving this state forward as much as we could. And so this helps paint that picture of a more modern state that we should be embracing.
San Antonio friends, Progress Texas is proud to welcome Mayor Ron Nierenberg as our guest for a live podcast taping at our Party for Progress on Tuesday, May 6th, and you're invited. We look forward to a long overdue visit to Alamo City. Again, mark that date, Tuesday, May 6th, live pod taping with Mayor Ron Nierenberg and good fun with you in San Antonio. See the show notes and get your tickets right now. And thanks to Austin Kaplan and the Kaplan Law Firm, Julianne Reeves, Tracy Miller, Will Judy, and more for their generous support of our San Antonio Party for Progress.
For our next question, we'll jump into the national conversation on transportation with the Trump administration's recent move to pull federal funding for the Texas Central Railway project, proposing a high-speed rail from Houston to Dallas. Miriam, then Rep. Bucy, could you please tell us why you think there is both a national and state level resistance to solutions like high-speed rail, with elected officials trying to hike prices and pull funding for our public transport infrastructure, and bonus points for connecting that back to our state's dependency on cars and ties to oil and gas?
That is a very big question. I will take a stab, but I think there's a lot going on. I mean, maybe I'll first just start by saying that it's kind of extremely odd because we're talking about something that like you wouldn't think would be political. We're talking about like giving people options that are convenient. I mean, who wouldn't want to like get on a train and go to sleep and be in Dallas an hour later? Like, why has that become such a politically charged topic? So there's a lot going on there. There's cultural things, but I think, to the point you just mentioned, there's also big money involved. The highway industrial complex is huge at this point, and there are powerful lobbies, both in the highway construction, and also, oil, gas, car industry, that have really, this isn't a new thing. That those industries have shaped our car-reliant transportation system since cars came on the scene. There's the famous story of car companies buying up the streetcar system in LA only to dismantle it and make people dependent on cars. So we still, I think, haven't escaped from those influences. But this is one of the things where I feel like if we could somehow, bring this to the voters, to the population at large, I mean, it's so wildly popular. You talk to people on the street from any walk of life. Everybody loves riding on a train. I was riding on our Red Line the other day that goes, basically from Austin to Leander. And there was a family there that for their kid's birthday, like the birthday day was just they were going to ride back and forth on the train. I mean, people love this kind of stuff. It shouldn't be so hard, but somehow it is.
I think Miriam is hitting a lot of points. And one about the Red Line, I've got 2 girls, a 3 and 5-year-old. They love just getting on the train. I mean, it is an activity in itself. But I think one of the challenges we have right now is the Trump administration is going to set us back. And they're going to set us back blindly and spitefully. And their goal right now is to cut costs without thinking through it. And so I don't know why they picked to pull, I believe, a $68 million grant from the Houston-Dallas high-speed train. I'm glad that the owners said that they're going to continue to move forward with the project, and they're not going to let that stop them. And hopefully, as people start seeing, Elon Musk, who's running this administration when it comes to cutting costs, and Doge going out and just blindly cutting money anywhere and everywhere, it's not limiting it to blue states. This is a red Texas that they're cutting this big program in. Hopefully there'll be repercussions for that, and we'll see a change in 4 years and be able to get these projects back on track. But again, we're going to suffer for the next 4 years as we're seeing a lot of kind of the Build Back Better programs where they can take a hit, and we're seeing it happen all across red states and middle America, just like in the blue states. And so hopefully we'll have some consequences at the ballot box, and people will respond. But in the meantime, we need to keep doing what we can at the local level, whether that's for independent investors, whether that's through city government, county government, states, to push through this. But I think what's happened nationally is they have decided that at least their extreme base cares about cutting costs without thinking about the service and project being cut. And so it seems pretty blind what they're doing, just to go out and do these just shattering projects that are in the works. And there's a lot of people that are worried about their projects right now. And so we're going to see this continue to grow and expand where local communities are going to be hurt and states are going to be hurt. So I think, that would be devastating. And we're just going to kind of have to suffer through it. We can respond at the ballot box, and hopefully it'll be a wake-up call for people. But I don't know exactly why this. I mean, I think when we think about Texas, there is too strong of a force from, as you said, the builders when it comes to wanting to build the concrete and pave the concrete for the roads. I think the landowners, they need to be treated respectfully and fair, but we also need to not stop projects that impact the entire state. And so finding the right balance, and maybe there's been a history where that balance wasn't found. And so now you see such a strong force in opposition to doing right away for these projects. I think it's also should of note that you really see this fight when it comes to other mobility. When it comes to highways, people don't seem to fight it as much, right? At least my Republican colleagues. I'm sure the landowners still do, but my Republican colleagues really get concerned when someone wants to put a small 8-foot wide train track through someplace, but not when they want to put, a 4-lane highway through somebody's private land. So we should be consistent. We should fairly take care of the landowners, but we shouldn't stop progress. The state is about growth and progress, and we need to do it. And I think that message is stronger than it deserves to be in this capital of letting, kind of the few outweigh the many here.
Let's pivot to some other transportation solutions and projects. We all wish we didn't have to drive so much, be stuck in traffic, and yet highways and their ever-present construction and congestion, as y'all have noted, eat up a huge amount, almost 96% of the TxDOT budget. Something needs to change, not just regarding our roadways or vehicles, but because at least one person has died daily on Texas roads since November 7th, 2000, according to the Texas Department of Transportation. And because Texas vehicles accounted for 0.5% of worldwide carbon dioxide emissions, even though we represent 0.4% of the population. That's all to say, what do you think the future of Texas transportation depends on? And please share with us specific transport-related initiatives you think would improve Texan lives regarding affordability, public health, and environmental concerns. Rep. Bucy, if you could go first, and then Miriam.
Yeah, and we're talking about this on Earth Day, and I think thinking about how transportation locally could really change the way we function in our day-to-day lives, not just getting from one community to the other. We talked about high-speed rail. We have planes. We should have high-speed rail. We can get there. We have the highway system. But then how do we move within our communities? And that needs to change. And that would change, the pollution in our urban communities, which is really from cars sitting in traffic and moving so slow back and forth. If we could get more people on trains and rapid buses, it would change that. And so we need to make sure that Texas is a welcoming community for that. And it's not right now. The state doesn't help support our local communities when it comes to building out, our mobility projects at the local level. It's all done, either at the city or with federal grants, as long as Trump doesn't cut those as well. But the state does come in and meddle. And I'd love to talk about what's going on here in the legislature. We had Representative Ellen Troxler, who once upon a time served on the Austin City Council, have her bill heard in committee yesterday. It's House Bill 3879. It would come in, and it's so important that we really understand what this bill does. It would come in and it would kill Project Connect as we know it for the city of Austin. And it's one thing to say, I don't agree with the policy, and so I'm going to go stop it. It's another thing. And what she's really doing here is she is overturning a Democratic election. It's not the will of a city council alone. It is the will of the voters of this community, the voters of Austin. 70% turnout election, 58% voted for this. So this is a bigger conversation than do you agree with Project Connect. This is a conversation of do you agree with democracy and the will of the voters. And Ellen Troxler has shown us 2 sessions in a row now, she does not give a damn about the voters of Austin and caring what they have to say when it comes to spending their own tax dollars. And not only that, not only does she not respect them, they also continue to pretend that they don't understand or have the knowledge to understand what they voted on and why they did it. I've been really looking into this issue lately, preparing for the hearing last night that we had. And if you look, I think it's incredibly clear what Project Connect was. I think the voters of Austin are well informed, they're educated voters, and they knew what they were voting on. Has the project changed? Absolutely. And that's why we did it the way we did, was taking the M&O money and giving it to another organization to spend so there would be flexibility. And so there could be the ability for projects to evolve and change. And because of all the bureaucratic holdups that people have brought with lawsuits and other things, the cost goes up. COVID, the cost goes up and things change. And so they have to adapt. And we've created a really kind of a beautiful system within the law to do this. And I think the voters of Austin knew what they were doing. And I think it's disrespectful that we have state representatives that want to overturn election and then also call our voters dumb by assuming they didn't know what they were voting for in the first place. And so we've got to stop these wars here in Texas, and we've got to go the other direction. Instead of hindering local communities, we need to be supporting local communities and helping, because if we can get great infrastructure like this all throughout our urban core, it would dramatically help the pollution problem that we know is growing in the state.
And Miriam, this is Texas Streets Coalition bread and butter. I'd love to hear more about some transportation solutions that you believe could improve Texan lives.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that we're moving more towards less the long distances, but the shorter distances. How do we get around within our communities, which is so important. That really shapes our day-to-day lives in very profound ways. And when you think about transportation policy overall, it's about so much more than getting from point A to point B. It's about asking questions like, where are point A and point B? Like, why did the chicken cross the road? What are we trying to move to? And a lot of that is really about access. Transportation is about giving us access to what we need, to people, to jobs, to opportunities. And so if you think about the solutions, it's important to be really precise also about the problem. And I would say that the problem that we really face is that to access these essentials, to access groceries, to access jobs, to access friends and family, often requires us to spend way too much time driving on dangerous roads in ways that are bad for our health, they're bad for the health of our surrounding communities, and for the environment at large. Not to mention the fact that it shuts out a quarter of the population. A quarter of the population does not drive because they are too young, they are too old, they have a disability, they can't afford a car. So if we're really thinking big picture about, how do we make sure that everyone has access? Yes, we need to be doing investments in a wide range of transportation choices, but there are also holistic approaches that you need to be thought about as well. We need to think about how we're using land. We need to make sure that affordable housing is built near the transit and near the places that people need to go. I've heard it said that, kids and the elderly are an indicator species for a healthy transportation system. When you see young people and older people moving around their communities confidently and independently, you know that you have a transportation system that's not just inclusive, but that's creating vibrant, enriched lives.
Miriam is so right to talk about how this type of mobility and transportation also ties into, and I know that's what we're focusing on, but it ties into affordable housing and it ties into pollution in the environment. And I represent the suburbs, so I'm very pro my people, but also we talk about pollution. It's sitting in traffic. It's the long commute. It's also the lost time with your kids, the lost time with your family. My drive is 12 miles from the Capitol to my house. And again, middle of the night, leaving the Capitol late at 2 a.m, I can do it in under 20 minutes. But in the morning when I have to be here, it takes an hour. And you just think about the time sitting in the traffic doing that. If we can really build out, specific to Austin, Project Connect, different in other communities, in urban cores like this, and we can build up and have more urbanization and more housing where people can walk straight to the train or the bus stop, walk to the grocery store on the corner, we can truly have an impact that would be pro-environment, pro-urban core, and just pro-everyone's affordability and mobility in our communities.
It's true for so many different infrastructural policies that when we make things more accessible for some, it's more accessible for all. And definitely transportation is no exception. Our last question for y'all is just to list out some reasons why people should care. This conversation, as we've noted, is about more than the vehicles we use, planes, trains, automobiles, so on and so forth. This is a daily, vital component of everyday life that intersects with other issues. We all depend on this system working, being accessible, and hopefully funded and improved upon. Why should we be invested in making our transportation system more affordable, sustainable, equitable, whatever you think?
Transportation is about movement, and movement is so basic. It's the basic ingredient of life. And if we talk about why do we care about transportation, I mean, you can go huge and you can zoom in to the real nitty-gritty. On the big picture, I mean, you've already spoke about this astonishing fact that Texas roadways account for 0.5% of global climate emissions. That's more than the entire world's railroad system. So it's crazy. And there have been so many reports that have come out recently from the International Panel on Climate Change, from the US DOT, saying if we don't fix this, we just will not meet our climate goals. Like, this will not work if we don't fix transportation. It is such a crucial piece to this crisis that we're facing globally. And this is one of the reasons I personally got really involved in this issue. But then, as we were talking about, I mean, it touches us in such small ways, in such everyday ways. I was just reading an article yesterday about how much social capital is lost through our over-reliance on cars. One of the theories about why cities have been such important places for the development of new ideas, for new businesses, for creativity, is because of chance encounters. We gain so much from coincidentally encountering one another. And that's not something that happens when you're in a car, unless you're crashing into another car, which is not the kind of chance encounter you want to be having. So, it creates, the kinds of buildings we build, the way we interact with each other, how we move, the air we breathe. It touches us in so many ways. So I guess I feel like there's not a whole lot you can care about that wouldn't somehow connect it to caring about transportation. And I hope I'm not being overly biased there.
No, I also think, when you think about Texas, Texas in our good times we've been a leader, and we are so dramatically behind when it comes to investing and building out a transportation network that works for everyone. Miriam told us about 25% of people don't drive. So how are we serving those Texans? And then I think about the other part of Texas is, once upon a time we were a leader. We also are a state that, at least philosophically, if not in our actions, believe in independence and freedom. And if we are reliant on one system, even if we all like our trucks and like driving, we don't have the freedom of choice right now when it comes to mobility. We don't have the freedom of access. And if you don't have a car yourself, you don't have freedom at all. And so how do you get from one place to the other efficiently and effectively? And if we could build this structure out, if we could have the diversity of our road system and our planes, but also our trains, and then to connect the cities from one to another, but then true mobility within a city where we spend most of our time going from home to work and back, then we would really live up to, I think, kind of the philosophical idea of an independent Texas, of freedom when it comes to choice and how we want to choose to live our lives. And Greg Abbott and the conservative leaders here have failed us at every step on this. But we've got some good legislation this session. They're getting hearings, and we could actually do what's right. And Governor Abbott could truly make Texas a leading state in mobility if he could just get behind some of these bills and help us diversify the state.
Thank you both so much, Representative John Bucy and Miriam Schoenfield with the Texas Streets Coalition and Rethink 35, for joining us today. Do y'all have any last thoughts or resources, calls to action you want to share with our audience? Rep Bucy, if you would go first.
I hope you'll come out on Monday. We've got House Bill 483. I believe we're going to have county judges from up and down the I-35 corridor there to testify. We'd love to have other activists talk about why we need high-speed rail in Texas. I'm excited to lay that bill out on Monday, and hope to have y'all here as a one call of action. We've got other legislation, though. We've got to overturn the ban on high-speed rail. We've got to bring awareness and attention, and we've got to stop people that are trying to overrule local control and local communities, like Ellen Troxler with House Bill 3879. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's 40 plus days left of session, and we need people engaged and fighting to the end, because we can stop bad things from happening and bring awareness and hopefully pass some good legislation to help this state.
Well, first, let me just echo, do everything Representative Bucy says, do it throughout the rest of session. These are extremely, extremely important issues that really impact all Texans. And I guess the other thing I would say, from the advocacy perspective, is just that, there are groups, transportation advocates, kind of forming all over the state. I think in Texas specifically, like people are waking up to the need for something else. And when the representative was talking about, like the philosophy of Texas, the spirit of Texas. I mean, can you imagine those like cowboys from the movies, like sitting behind a wheel, like stuck in congested traffic? Like that's not what we're about. That's not who we are. So, so the movement is really growing. And so I would just encourage people to kind of look around locally. Like what are your transportation and housing advocates in your area up to, and can you get involved with that? And I'm also really excited, tomorrow I'm going to be traveling to the second annual National Communities Over Highways Conference. So there's also a national movement growing. And so this is a great time to get involved if you're interested in these issues. If you want to reach out to me or to the Texas Streets Coalition, you can email rethink35atx@gmail.com. And there are lots of people that would be very excited to plug more people in.
And we will have links to both Representative Bucy's website and Rethink 35, Texas Streets Coalition in the description. That is all for now, folks. Here at Progress Texas, we're working hard to scale our work and reach larger numbers of Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z Texans, and give voice to a growing majority of people with the ultimate goal of leading to a more representative democracy. We rely mostly on everyday Texans who value our hard work and share our belief that a Texas that works for everybody is the Texas we want to live in. We don't do subscriptions or paywalls because we believe the message of progress is one that everyone should be able to access, learn from, and act upon. So if you've become a regular listener, we could use your support and no amount is too small. Thanks to Irene Escalante, Lavelle Ferris, and Megan Fassbinder for their valued and ongoing support. Go to progresstexas.org/donate, and thanks for listening to all of you that press progress forward here in the Lone Star State. See you next time, and thanks for coming.